And that is just truly egregious design in my opinion. If there was one takeaway from this entire review, it would just be please never do that again. And if you're writing an adventure at home, do not do that in your adventure. It's just not functional for the referee to actually use at the table. Welcome back, folks. I'm the referee, Connor McCloskey, and here we talk about 5e adventure reviews and 5e adventure design. And today we are talking about Kobolds and Cowboys, which is an adventure by Critical Crafting. It is designed for 4 or 5 kobold posse members, so it doesn't actually give you specific character levels, but it does supply those kobold posse members for you to play as. This supplement is 136 pages in total and has some player options and some other things in there as well. But today we're going to focus mainly on the 50 pages that cover the 20 train cars that make up this adventure. So you want to rob a train, eh? Not just any train, but a locomotive golem. At the front of this living train lies a treasure beyond belief, but can your posse reach it, or is it just another suicide mission? In this adventure, the characters play as a never-ending horde of kobolds, attempting to reach the front of the locomotive golem, forming a kobold posse, trying to commandeer the locomotive and claim the treasures within the conductor's car. With special rules as described here, this is a grinder, or grindhouse adventure, meaning the characters are going to die. A lot. So as you might be able to tell from that description, this adventure has a great, really fun feel. It's similar to a Shadow Dark Gauntlet or a more general character funnel, which I think are a blast. I have had fun playing, I've written my own, and I just think they're great. And in this one, you play as that posse of kobolds, making your way further up the train through train car after train car, riding your naked mole rat mounts, and continuing in wave after wave as you succeed or die and push your way onward. There's lots of great advice in here for how to run the adventure, especially since it is sort of a little bit different than you would commonly see, and that zany Blaze of Glory style is really embraced throughout it and really comes through. The first thing that springs to mind though is there's no rules, at least that I could find, and maybe I'm missing it, for taking the finally successful kobolds and taking those victorious survivors and moving forward with them into other adventures. There are some player options later in the book, but if you want to continue on with your particular guy who made it all the way to the front of the train, I don't see that in here, and I feel like that's a pretty big omission. I know that's what my players would want to do and what I would want to do if I was a player. As you might imagine, this is a very linear adventure, literally on a railroad track. The DM can adjust which train cars they use and the order of the train cars and either cut it down if it's going to be a one-shot or expand. That's not exactly the same as exploration, but really this plays out as more of an event rather than a dungeon. And sometimes that sort of change of pace is fun. So this isn't really a criticism to say that it is linear in this case, because as I mentioned, that is sort of expected when the adventure is literally railroad based. The maps are all very usable and look great. There's lots of fun variation and differentiation between train cars, and at one point even a rival posse shows up to challenge you and try and cut in on your heist. In some spots the layout could use some work. There are some column breaks, there are some page breaks where it splits from one page to the next, and then there are a few spread breaks as well where you have to continue reading on the next page and might have to flip back and forth. But importantly, this is not the case in the actual train section going room to room, which is for the best. The train car rooms are well written and seem really well thought out, though some of them are too long in places to really use directly from the book and just run it from the book. You're probably going to have to take notes on some of these to simplify it down. In general, there's either single spread rooms or 2 spread rooms that take up a total of 4 pages, and those single spread rooms seem fine and very usable, but some of those 2 spread rooms are either too wordy or just have too much going on for one instance, which is why they take up so many pages for really a single encounter or a single room. Also, some of them feel pretty contrived, where they're just sort of taking desert or cowboy concepts and packing them into different rooms, which in a lot of instances leans really well into the sort of zany nature of this. But there are a few times where it seems to grate a little bit, like things are just slightly too forced, even given the context of the adventure. There is one riddle room, which I think is actually very well done. There's 3 or 4 different riddles in there, and when reading through them, I was actually impressed. They seem to be just the right level of simple, but not obvious, that can make riddles actually fun to get right and overcome and move past fairly easily without getting frustrated, but without feeling like it's super simple either. Also, the monsters are really cool. There's a bunch of unique monsters. They're very thematic. They seem easy to use, except there are several stat blocks that are split across pages, and then there are a couple that are even split across spreads. So the stat block itself is split from one spread to the next spread, and that is just truly egregious design in my opinion. Just really terrible. Off the top of my head, I can't think of whether or not any of the official books do that, but even if they do, they shouldn't do it either. It's just not functional. In fact, it was so counterintuitive when I came to them that way that I thought my PDF viewer must be screwing up and had switched the pages somehow and had to go and double check I had the settings right. There's just no real way, if you are running a 4-page dungeon room, to then go and have to use a monster stat block split across a spread that you have to flip back and forth between while you're trying to run the room. If there was one takeaway from this entire review, it would just be, please never do that again. And if you're running an adventure at home, do not do that in your adventure. It's just not functional for the referee to actually use at the table. The magic items seem really fun, well designed, thematic to what you would hope they would be, and plentiful, which feels on brand for a heist. The kobolds themselves, there's 5 different types, and they all seem well differentiated, they seem fun to play, and you might get a chance to cycle through a bunch of them as your kobolds die and you need to quickly grab a new character to continue on further up the train. Also, depending on how the entire heist goes, there's a few different endings that might take place, and from my reading, those all seemed like good, fun, thrilling endings. I will say, though, at the end, it seems like way too much treasure for whatever level this adventure is supposed to be. The kobolds they give you are challenge rating 1, so even if we say this is supposed to be the equivalent of a level 4 or 5 adventure, there's just a ton of treasure in there that could easily screw up the economy of whatever's going to happen next in your game. Overall, I like it. I think it's well designed, other than the monster stat block layout, and the zany, frenetic nature of it is sort of infectious and is pretty fun. So I'm going to say 7 stars for this one. I would probably run this with some work, and that work would mainly be figuring out how to then adjust those kobolds going forward as regular characters, because I know once my players have those survivors that made it through and have all that cash, they're going to want to continue on with those characters. And for some of the rooms, cutting way down on complexity, I think. So please remember to like and subscribe if you find this useful, and if you have any recommendations for a third-party adventure that I ought to check out, put it in a comment below. Also, I'm getting my Discord server up and running for the referee, where we can talk about other adventure reviews, other adventures we ought to review, help each other design our own adventures, and show off adventures we have designed. So if any of that seems interesting to you, I will put that in the information below. Next time, we will be looking at the famous Dungeons of Drakkenheim by the illustrious Dungeon Dudes. So until then, I've been your referee, Connor McCloskey, and that's today's game. Thanks, guys.